I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 344 of Spawn Year. This is why I detest trying to thoroughly analyze a story before I've read all of its pieces. All I have to go on is what's come before, what's in front of me, and my expectations based on prior experience with material in Spawn's universe. With a brand new creative team, making a totally standalone complete piece, I'm trying my best not to let preconceptions get the better of me. But I've trained myself never to get my hopes up about anything I read in Spawn Year if, for no other reason than Spawn Year is supposed to be my hell, and I must assume that anything in its design is likely to be here with the express purpose to deceive, distract, or outright torture me. And the story here may be no exception, but not the way I expected. If it is torture, it isn't because it's bad or disappointing, at least not so far, but because it's such an effective dissection of the power of fiction writing, the human personal truths that good writing produces, and because there's some disturbing truth within this fiction itself that hits uncannily home for me. Blangio and Erbetta took an enormous, ambitious risk in writing a story about writing a story. In college, several of my professors considered that a taboo subject, or at least a potentially trite and obvious one only a very skilled writer with a great story and the command of narrative could pull off. 3 issues in, these guys are nailing it. A story about why writers write and what a good story is really doesn't work if the story itself isn't demonstrating the fundamental tenets of storytelling and a command of language. Blangio does all of that and more, and is clearly writing what he knows, not just trying to be novel by writing about a novel. He demonstrates a knowledge of the cold and cutthroat publishing world, and writes a very believable fiction editor who comes to realize the writer sent him the only existing hard-written manuscript of the novel he's been scrawling on corpses. Everything is beginning to come together, both in plot and theme, but it continues to keep me guessing. This story has gone from attention-getting and potentially compelling to quite possibly the most engaging, sophisticated, and poignant thing I've read in Spawn Year. It's all quite involved, but the Cliff's Notes version is that the writer has been killing the dreck of the city. The first victim turns out to be a drug runner, the second a prostitute, and the last 2 were drug lords, using the butcher shop as a front for their black market business. They must all be personally connected to the writer somehow, likely people who got in the way of publishing his story or are related to someone who did, because the prostitute he killed was Frank Merrill's girlfriend, who he seems to have murdered to get Merrill's attention after he failed to publish the writer's novel. We saw the hardened, overworked Frank last issue with the prostitute before she died, and at the opening of this issue, poring over papers about the writer. It wasn't until Frank reveals the writer's manuscript to his other girlfriend, Violet, and yep, Violet is wearing violet, that I was certain he wasn't the writer himself. I like how I'm just given scenes with this guy, building details about his uncouth lifestyle, how cynical and lacking in empathy rejecting manuscripts and reading junk all day has made him. See, hits really close to home. And I'm made to think I'm looking at the killer. A jaded editor hates his life and kills the people maybe who represent what he's become, writing a story, maybe one that's better than all the garbage he deals with, or maybe it is that garbage, to present what it is that's driven him to this place. That's what I thought it might be anyway. I loved having my expectations subverted and remaining in the dark. Frank, recognizing the killer's writing on the news, conveniently still has the manuscript and decides to burn the evidence instead of taking it to the police, and he takes matters into his own hands to get revenge for the prostitute's murder. He goes to the writer's apartment at the end, since the address was on the envelope, while Sam and Twitch are nowhere near on the right trail. Twitch follows the drug lead and hunts down a man he thinks might be a suspect, Jacob Marley, who has that namesake because he is a selfish jerk who takes advantage of people to fill his pockets, and it's kinda Christmas time. That's all I've got. I mean, he's not wrapped up in chains and his jaw's intact, so it's certainly not that. Twitch gets shot in the arm because Marley's protecting his drug money, and Twitch realizes that while he caught a criminal, it's not the writer. And Sam isn't doing much investigating at all, laid up in the hospital after Twitch and Garland found him nearly frozen to death in that freezer. Once again, a fun callback to prior continuity, when Twitch says, "I'm usually the one who winds up in the hospital." That was a standard dramatic fallback for stories involving these characters, and it's perhaps unintentionally amusing that in an issue that reverses those roles, Twitch still gets shot in the last 2 pages. Sam and Garland, who didn't get along or understand each other early on, are starting to bond here, and while I figured this would be the standard opposites attract scenario, I'm seeing some chemistry and enjoying the complexity that's starting to form in their dynamic. They have a beautifully well-written and genuinely emotional exchange in the hospital, in which they find some common ground through Garland's frustration at being unable to nail the writer's MO or personality through his handwriting. She sees the way a person writes a little like body language and mannerisms. She reads between the lines to find hidden meaning behind the way a person writes something, which is subconscious and unintended. Sam, of course, thinks this is bunk, and finally, in a more civil manner, expresses his feeling that things just aren't as complicated as the intellectuals and the overly educated try to make them out to be. And he says that anybody can write a book because he did. He seems to be selling himself short, and Garland's point is that there's more to everyone than even they realize. She proceeds to prove it by revealing that she predicted a man would commit suicide just by looking at his handwriting once, and he did. But Garland also proves that she has all the same impulses and feelings that everybody else has, that she's not just living above all the primitives and has found some higher state of being. When she, in the previous issue, spits on one of the drug lords for disrespecting her profession on account of her gender. He called her the B word. When she's murdered by the writer, Garland feels guilty, and Sam consoles her, saying she wasn't the one who killed him and that her reaction was human and normal. They also connect because she feels Sam's frustration in not wanting to dig for answers and wishing things were really as simple as she makes them out to be. She's used to looking at handwriting and understanding a person, and she says the writer's makes no sense. Now the writer must be Todd McFarlane. Garland wants to understand the writer, and Sam wants to catch him. But here, I think they're discovering they want the same thing. Sure, Garland is fascinated by the writer, and she's using the case to challenge her skills, but being in the thick of it now, I think she's frustrated because she wants him caught and knows she should be able to help Sam make that happen. And I think Sam is talking a big game about things being less complicated than some people want them to be, but I think he's curious to know why someone would do what the writer has and overcompensates because he thinks the human thing to do is to hate what the killer is doing and just stop him. To be too interested is to, in a way, validate the killer, or at least to humanize him. There are 2 lines that make me stop and think here. One was Garland's at the end of that scene when she says, "The way we write is the fingerprint of our souls." That really solidifies the idea that she and Sam are after the same thing, and just use different approaches. The other is from a woman Twitch interviews, Allie, who knew the first victim through her boyfriend. She calls the writer an angel God sent to punish people for their sins, which is a really typical and overly dramatic perspective to give somebody in a Spawn comic. And she says, innocence is a luxury with too high of a price, and none of us can afford it. I love that line. I think it's about the human constant that's at the heart of every good story, what we want. Everybody wants something. Sam and Garland's story is all about understanding what they want and reevaluating what sorts of people they are based on that. The writer wants his story told, and taking that to a twisted extreme has made him a monster. The quote, price that's too high is pure unadulterated selflessness. At least, that's my reading on it. We would all, perhaps, depending on how you look at it, all be innocent if we weren't driven by what we want, but by what's best for everyone else. It's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. And according to Garland, our writing reveals our desires, that which makes us human. I wonder what Garland would see if she read my notebook. Doubt? Fear? Regret? Perhaps she could tell me, through the progression of my writing, if I have changed at all in this place, and if it's been for the better. I related to Garland a lot here, especially in her passion for reading between the lines and her intense frustration when she finds nothing there. How ironic that I should find a kindred spirit in a fictional character with such similar views and interests in this of all universes. I shall cherish this among those precious few wonderful reading experiences during Spawn year, regardless of what issue 4 may bring. Signed, Captain Spawn.